No, kedves 11-es évfolyam, megyünk tovább a két háború közti világban. Ez az interwar period. And now we are going to speak about Soviet Russia. Last time we were talking about another dictatorship that was created. This is the fascism, the fascist dictatorship of Mussolini. Now we are going to speak about Russia and afterwards connected to it the Stalinist dictatorship. So first of all, how the Soviet Union was created and what is the ideological basis. As you see, the Bolshevism and communism is the ideological basis. Bolshevik party was led by the famous Lenin, and as we talked about during the First World War, he returned to Russia and he was leader figure in the civil war that was started in 1917. So the ideological basis is Marxism. In this picture you see the Marxist ideology, which examines history from the prehistoric times to ancient times and feudalistic Middle Ages and 19th century capitalism. And Marx believed, of course, that during history everywhere the classes, the poor people and the rich people were fighting. So there is always this red arrow, we call it the class struggle. So a revolution is needed. He believes that a revolution of the proletars must come. And this is what Lenin said, that in 1917 it really happened. So in 1917, when the proletariat revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution of October went through, dictatorship of the proletariat was introduced by this revolution. Lenin was the ideologist and he had to somehow transform the Marxist ideology. He said that permanent revolution is needed. So this is Lenin's idea, that permanent revolution, so the revolution mustn't be stopped. And he also said that we don't need, of course, internationalism is important, so communism must be spread in the world, but it can be created in a single country, and Russia will be a perfect stage to start socialism and communism by the revolution, the civil war. Okay? So this is the ideological basis, but they had to put everything in practice. So how will communism work? The Civil War was a bloody civil war between 1917 and 22, as you see, and the whites, the non-communists, and the reds, the communists, were fighting. The famous Red Army was created for the first time, and the communists created war communism, which is really like war economy. So they nationalized industry, so they took everything for the party. Nationalization means when the country, the state, takes all the private property, the companies, the factories for itself. There was compulsory delivery. I don't go into details, you also know this. In Russia, money transfer disappeared, so people started bargaining, changing things. I mean, exchanging things like I give you bread, you give me something, a tool or whatever. Market disappeared because of war communism, and there was serious problem with supply. This means famine, and people started demonstrations, strikes, and revolts. And I put here 1921. This picture belongs here. We call it the Kronstadt Rebellion. Kronstadt is a harbor where loyal Navy soldiers, so sailors who were really communists, started a revolt against war communism. This was a serious problem for Lenin because loyal people turned against him in 1921 because the situation was so bad. This is why NEP, New Economic Policy, was introduced by Lenin and his circle. So they bring reforms. Reforms to keep power, of course. They didn't want to lose what they had got. They restricted, they recreated the market, but in a restricted way. So the state, of course, controlled it, but market reappeared, and people could sell their goods, like if they had surplus, they had some more stuff, they could sell it on the market. So this was an economic reform, something really close to capitalism, but they didn't want to call it like that. Well, in 1922, civil war was won by the communists. So this is when the Soviet Union was born. This picture in your book will help understand these events. I go on, and I would like you to remember that the Soviet Union had to be born, which became a federal system. What is a Soviet? The Soviet is a council. People who work together, live together, created Soviets, and these Soviets took all the local power everywhere. These were led by communists. And this means that the Soviets got united. So this is a federal system of states, the Soviet Union. Well, this is not about the nationalism of different states, but this is international because many kinds of people joined the Soviet Union. States were forced to join, and by this, they had the right to leave, but actually they couldn't, because if they want to leave, they became enemies of the Soviets, nationalists and imperialists they became. Imperialists are those who belong to the Western world, which is capitalist. So the Soviet Union was a forced union of people. In 1924, the Soviet Constitution was born. Just a minute. I am going to kill this. Sorry. Soviet Communist Party was born as a new party. So we call it Bolshevik Party was transformed to be Soviet Communist Party, and the chief secretary of the party became the ultimate leader. The ultimate leadership was focused in the hand of one person, and actually in the hands of the political office, which was a very small circle. This is the Soviet Union. Well, a huge country, as you see, and these territories belonged to the Soviet Union, like, for example, the territory of Ukraine. There was an economic reform that went through. First of all, we have to talk about industry. What they did was really connected to ideology. There was extensive industrialization. So industry became number one field of economy that had to be developed. And as you see, the fastest growing thing is the tools and machines that were created. And of course, the whole industry could develop. And look, the timeline says that after 1928, this development became really fast. What happened? The ideology said that the power of the proletariat must be demonstrated. So the leader of the society, the leading layer of society, are the proletars. And at the same time, military power must be increased. So heavy industry and military industry were most developed areas. The NEP, the new economic policy of Lenin, was abolished, and nationalization of all companies continued. So no companies remained in private hands. Planned economy was introduced in industry and everything. So 3 and 5 year plans were created. What are plans? These plans give you how much you have to produce and what quality you should create and such. But these goals were unrealistic, and the numbers were always cheated, and the quality decreased by this, unfortunately. People had to take part in working competitions like the Stakhanovite movement. Stakhanov was a famous worker. I'm going to show you a picture later. Result. The result is a modern industry was created and a very strong army for the Soviet Union, of course, but the price had to be paid by everyday people. I'm going to show you now. This was Stakhanov, who was a miner, and his numbers were cheated by the state. He could mine, I think, 100 tons a day or in a work shift. Of course, these numbers belong to a group of people, but the state said that it was Stakhanov who did it, so he is the best worker. Everyone should follow his pattern. And these kind of medals were given to people who were good workers. So working competition. In agriculture, what happened? Industrialization had to be supported by agriculture too. The goal was to make private property disappear, so the lands of peasants were taken. To create labor force to industry, a lot of peasants had to go to industry to work. What happened? Peasants were forced to join the collective or the kolkhoz. In this picture you see it was a forced thing that collectivization went through. They gave in their animals, everything, land to the kolkhoz, and they became workers of the kolkhoz. There was compulsory delivery, which created serious famine. I'm going to speak about it later. Kulaks. Who are the kulaks? They were the system enemies, those who didn't want to join the kolkhoz, or richer peasants who didn't want to give in their lands. Their lands were taken and they were imprisoned and sent to forced labor camps, the system of Gulag, also going to talk about later. State exported food for money to finance industrialization. So there was famine in the country and they produced a lot of food, but they exported food because industry had to be developed. This was crazy. And what happened? Of course, compulsory delivery and famine. For example, on the territory of Ukraine, between 1932 and 33, there was serious famine. 7 million people died, Ukrainian people, because of compulsory delivery. The state took everything they produced. We call this Holodomor, actually the Holocaust of the Ukrainian people. I could have put even worse pictures here. Look at these children, they are starving. So 7 million died because of this kind of economic policy in Ukraine. Okay, so the Soviet Union was created, létrejött a Szovjetunió. Azt kérem, hogy ez alapján folytassátok a jegyzetet, és a 184-186. oldalon az ábrákat is meg fogod látni. A könyv ábrái jól kiegészítik, amit itt láttál, tehát ez a feladatunk, és mindenkinek jó munkát kívánok!